You might be wondering why we're going to Poland for this year's UN meeting. Well, every year the COP travels around the world and it's in a different location. Each region of the world gets their chance to host a COP. This year it's Eastern Europe's turn, and Poland agreed to host the meeting. The COP, which stands for the Conference of the Parties, is an annual meeting held by the United Nations, hosting over 195 countries and observers from around the world. The full name of the meeting is a mouthful. It's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to the Conference of the Parties, so we just call it COP. This year, it's the 24th meeting of the COP in Katowice, Poland. We call it COP24. Have you heard of the COPs before? If not, you've probably heard of the Paris Agreement. This was the most recent plan agreed to under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This year in COP24, we'll be trying to understand how they're going to implement the Paris Agreement.
Instead of coming up with one shared goal that all countries would agree to, like decreasing emissions by 20% by the year 2030, countries have instead come up with a plan where they'll each have unique contributions. These are called the Nationally Determined Contributions, or the NDCs for short. Each country came up with an NDC to say exactly how they would curb their greenhouse gas emissions, and that's what they agreed to under the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement has many different components, including discussions of climate change adaptation, how countries are going to pay for adaptation and mitigation efforts, and how technology might be used to deal with the impacts of climate change. At COP24, we're going to be hearing a lot about all the different components of the Paris Agreement, and especially the NDCs.
This year we'll be attending the COP with 4 University of Maine graduate students and 3 teachers. Together, our delegation will focus on 2 main objectives.
The first is that we want to understand how people that come together from around the world make decisions about climate change that impact you, your community, and the communities that I study in Nicaragua and Samoa. The second reason is that we want to understand how the climate science, like the research that Will does, informs decisions that are made at the COP.
At this year's COP, over 20,000 people will attend. They'll be from around the world, countries like China, India, Brazil, all over Europe, Africa. All these countries will be there, and we'll get a chance to talk to most of them. Prime ministers from different countries will be there, leading their country in these negotiations, presidents from around the world, and other negotiators. This is really a great opportunity to get to learn from these people and how they're dealing with climate change, how they're asking the world to deal with climate change, and what we can do to help them. Thank you for joining us for this season of Follow a Researcher.
From UMaine to the UN.